Beneath the stars so bright, pull your hat down, make sure your cinch is tight. Horses kinda snuffy, cold chill up your spine. You'll get your ass moving, son, we're burning daylight.
Howdy there, I'm Matt McKinley and we're burning daylight.
In the saddle till the job's done right.
Welcome to Burnin Daylight, the only podcast for the working cowboy. Well, howdy there, daylight burners. Welcome back to the show. Hope you had a good weekend. We got a special guest today. You may have seen some of his work. He's fairly active in the cowboy groups on Facebook and helped put together one of the best documentary films that I've seen on the life of the working cowboy. It's called Cowboys, a Documentary Portrait. I did a whole review on it on this show, John. If I can find the link, I'll send it to you. Maybe you can tell me what I got wrong on it. But my biggest, I guess, criticism of it was it wasn't long enough. And if that's the only criticism I've got for it, I'd say you did a pretty good job. So, John, welcome to the show. Appreciate you joining me today.
Thanks, Matt. Pleasure to be here. Thanks for the kind words about film.
You bet. I've seen your stuff. You're a heck of a photographer, and it seems like you've been around kind of everywhere. It seems like you're an avid motorcycle rider too. It seems like.
Yeah, of late I am. Yeah, no, and there's like no doubt in my mind that it's sort of a surrogate for horse riding for me, and that's why I like it. You know, something between your legs that's moving you forward, and you're kind of out. You know, you feel the wind against your face, and you feel the change in temperature, and you smell things, and you just sort of feel connected to the countryside you're moving through. And it's like that, you know, it's filling a need that I have because I don't get to ride as often as I'd like living in a city.
Yeah, I bet. So we were talking just here earlier. You're at Austin, Texas, which is always, I mean, it's keep Austin weird's been a thing for as long as I can remember. But it seems like it got real weird here in the last several years, but in a different kind of way. But I think you kind of got to have those weird places throughout the country that from the weird places comes a lot of the cool stuff that we get to enjoy, you know?
Yeah, no, and as you and I were kind of talking about, you know, Austin's not what it was in the 70s or 80s. It's like a completely different place, but, you know, it's still turned into something overall good. Like any bigger city, it's got its issues, and you got to get out every so often. And, you know, if I'm not headed out for a branding somewhere along the year, you know, I would definitely go insane. But there are aspects of living in a city I certainly enjoy as long as I can leave it when I want.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought the same thing when I lived up in Fort Collins, which is, you know, that's a pretty small town, but I mean, city-wise anyways. But coming for me, I lived 20 miles south of a town of about 300 or 400 people. Graduated high school with 19, including me in my class, and then I go to, you know, a city of 150,000, and that seemed massive. I mean, it's a little bit of a culture shock, but it's you also had one of the better music scenes I've been around. You know, they really catered to the Texas, Oklahoma, you know, kind of the Austin scene that as they expanded throughout the country, that like kind of red dirt Texas scene really had a big impact in Fort Collins, and that was nice because you don't get that in these little bitty towns. Every now and then you might have a little band blow through town, but not very often. And that there's just certain things about living in the city. There is some definite benefit, but I also like to look around and not see anybody too.
Yep. No, it's hard to have both. You know, and I've kind of in my mind struck sort of a perfect balance. I know a lot of guys out on ranches and I could go to branding every year if I want, so I can get away when I need to. But at the same time, I go hear 10 or 15 great shows, music shows here in Austin every year, and I thoroughly appreciate it.
Yeah. That's there's definitely
Willie Nelson. We still have him, lives right around the corner.
One of my favorite memes I've ever seen, it was just a picture of Willie Nelson, and it said, one of these days these kids are going to have to look around and see what kind of world do they want me and Keith Richards to live in down the road, because I think he's almost into
die. Exactly. Those two will never die. They'll outlive all of us, no doubt about it.
I know it. I always said I hope Willie dies on stage, just ripping a big heater, singing Blue Eyes Crying in the Rain or something, and just croak mid-sentence.
I'll guarantee you he will, man. That guy is still, he performs all the time, and it's funny, I've made that joke a million times that he's definitely going to croak on stage.
I think that's the only way he can do it, is just that. Yep. And I feel like Ramblin' Jack Elliott's going to be the same way. He's gonna just croak mid-story with somebody that he met, and
as it should be.
Exactly, that's the way it should be. And like Boots O'Neill, he's probably gonna get bucked off on his head and break his neck one of these days, and I don't think he'd rather go out any other way. So
that story about Boots, where when we went and interviewed him for the film, he had been bucked off. I can't remember the name of a horse not too long beforehand.
Mm-hmm.
And the horse came back to the barn without him. And so, of course, everybody got, really worried. And this isn't that long ago. Boots was well in his 80s at that point. And so they went and found him out in the pasture, and he had a bunch of broken ribs and was pretty busted up. And he told them, just leave me here. This is like, I'm done, just leave me here. I'm fine. And they were like, hell no, we're not leaving you here, Boots. We're going to get you out of here. And they, he healed up fine. And he was still riding that horse that bucked him off when we interviewed him for the film. So I suspect you're probably right that guy, he's going to go a horseback the way Willie's going to go on stage.
Well, I think so. He actually just broke his leg earlier this last fall. He got bucked off. He broke his femur about I think he said it was about an inch above his knee that had been replaced. So they couldn't really do surgery on it. So they just had him in kind of a not so much a cast, but like a brace. And he was in pretty rough shape there for a little bit, because he had to lay down and had some pneumonia because of that. But he's back a horseback now.
Oh, okay. I hadn't heard that. And we screened the film, and Boots and several guys from the film came out in Lubbock. I can't remember when that was. I bet it's been, 9-10 months ago.
Mm-hmm.
And of course he was doing fine. Tom Morehouse was there, Jeff Bilberry. Yeah, no. So this is the first I've heard that he got in another horse accident and broke his leg. Well, I'm not surprised he's already riding again. That guy.
He's something else.
They broke the mold on Boots, that's for sure.
They really did. I had a chance to go down, and because I had a bunch of people request to have him on the show. And so I did a couple phone interviews with him, but I was able to go down to the Sixes and meet him. And it's really cool. We kind of got to be buddies. And so I try to call him once a week, and he's just, he's quite the guy, he's something else. He's got a wealth of knowledge. And I always tell people he's kind of like he's like the cowboy Forrest Gump, except he's not retarded. But he's seen just about everything. He tells that story, his first paying cowboy job. They just dumped him off at the rim of the Paladura Canyon. He waited there for a couple hours for somebody to come get him, and then And then he didn't live inside at all for like the next 10 years or so.
Yeah.
And it was just,
he told us those stories. Yeah, no, there's some, I mean, it's definitely from a different era of cowboying. He's sort of a link back to, and there's not that many of them left. There are a few, but back to sort of those, earlier days when cowboying on those big outfits was really kind of done differently.
Yeah, it really was. And I've never really worked on a real big outfit. I worked on a place up in Montana that ran maybe 3,000 head of mama cows. I mean, it was so fairly good size, but it wasn't anything like the Wine Cup or the Sixes or the Wagners or the JAs or anything like that. It was it was a fairly small outfit compared to some of those, but so I never got to go cowboy on the wagon, but I kind of grew up in farmer country too. So we didn't, one of our biggest pastures, I think that I worked was only about 1,000 acres. And then you get out into the public land stuff and it's 100,000 acres on one range.
Which is the beauty of those big Northern Nevada outfits. They may not run on that much deeded land, but you put that BLM land in and you can ride all day without seeing a fence, which is, one of the greatest things you can do cowboying.
Oh, it really is. I guess I was lucky enough to grow up like right on the edge of that BLM stuff. If you went just west of where I grew up, then you got into like, where Picture Canyon, Colorado is?
No.
Okay. It's kind of in that Three Corners area where the Oklahoma Panhandle and New Mexico and Colorado all meet. And there's it's not mountain country, but it's canyon country. And and it just you'd be driving across the prairie and then all of a sudden it drops down about 300 foot into sandstone and cedar canyons, and it's it's just incredible to like, because you go from just flat, the old joke, you can watch your dog run away for 3 days, and to some pretty tough country. It's pretty tough country, and you can, and a lot of that stuff is BLM country, and it's not near as big as like when you get into western Colorado and Utah and Nevada, but there's still some pretty good sized parcels through there that a guy can go ride and not see a whole lot of fences, but it's still nothing like the Great Basin stuff,
Yeah, no, those outfits are unique, no doubt about it, and have bred kind of a unique breed of cowboy or buckaroo up there as well.
Really self-reliant, just kind of handy at everything too. Not only are they really
in general, like that's something I've always, I've noted that same thing, and something I've always admired. And like, it was an area of cowboying, there's plenty of them, but it was one where I was deficient. I wasn't as self-reliant as those guys that, spent their whole life cowboying. And obviously by necessity, I mean, you wouldn't last out there, 25 miles from the nearest town if you couldn't figure out how to get stuff done yourself.
Mm-hmm. It seems like every one of those guys out here, they build their own leather stuff, they braid, they they weld, they do and I've got a handful of skills that I can do relatively well, but mostly like my skill comes from reading cattle and sorting and identifying sickness. But I always think I could probably hold my own on just about any outfit. I won't ever be the top hand out there, but I probably won't be in the way too much. But some of those guys are just, it's incredible to watch them work. And then all the stuff that they can do is pretty incredible.
Yeah, no, it's something to watch a really top hand, and then of course there's like some that are great with horses, some that are good at roping, some that are really good sorting cows or whatever. And, like a real top hand kind of is good at all that stuff. I've always greatly admired those guys and so enjoyed working around them. It's just, I'm like you. I was never going to be a top hand. I was competent, could help get the job done. But yeah, no, watching those guys it's a treat.
It really is. So whereabouts did you come from originally?
Yeah, it's I grew up in Dallas, Texas, believe it or not.
Okay.
My dad was a photographer, and he did a book on the working cowboy back in 1975.
Okay.
And his grandfather was a Teddy Roosevelt Rough Rider and was a cowboy in the out west of the U.S., but a lot down in Central and South America. Worked on some big ranches. They're kind of an odd, strange story. But so my dad kind of had this cowboy bug, and then he went and did that book, and he got to know some ranchers. And I was fascinated by cowboys, largely based on his stories, and then of course Will James books. And and then when I was 12, my dad, sent me a postcard saying I met this rancher named Benny Binion, and if you want a cowboy, he says he'll give you a job for the summer. So after 6th grade, I went to Binion's and spent that first summer there. And then after that, for the next 11 summers, I'd go out with a wagon the first half of the summer and then go back to Binion's the second half of the summer, and, did that, through college and into my first year of law school. And then I put it on ice until I returned to it all to work on the book, my own book, kind of where my dad left off. So yeah, that was sort of how I came to it all.
Well, did you finish law school? I think you did, right?
I did. Yep.
Okay. Did you?
It was funny.
Did you ever practice or?
Yeah, I did. The end of my cowboy career was after my first year of law school. I went out with a padlock wagon the first half of that summer and came back and worked for a law firm in San Antonio the second half, and the pay disparity between the two was pretty apparent when you did them back to back. And I was like, if you're going to go to school, you probably ought to, pursue being a lawyer. And so, yeah, I did. I went to work for a big law firm in DC, and then I went to work for Caterpillar, the big earth moving equipment for 11 years. And they moved me all around the world. And, cowboying just faded to the background. I stayed in touch with some friends, but hardly ever went to a ranch. I did a couple of brandings over all those years. And then I got serious about my own photography when I left Caterpillar for the sake of moving back to Austin. And pretty quickly on started thinking about, projects that I would do that had the potential to turn into books. And one of the first ones that came to mind was, doing one on cowboys. And I will say a big part of it was just for the sake of me being able to get back out to ranches. And so I told my wife, it's funny, I told my wife, hey, I've got this idea that I want to do a book on cowboys, and I want to go out for 2 weeks and come home for 3 over the course of a year. And that's what I'll do to complete the book. And I thought she was on board for that idea. And then a friend of ours had dinner with Erica, my wife, and called me and said, John, she will leave you if you do that. And our boys were both pretty young at the time. I had completely misread my wife. So I kind of did a reset on that and came back and said, well, what if I go out for 10 days, 4 times a year, and, take 3 years to do the book? Because I had the idea of going to 12 big outfits, and I definitely was going to be focused on the big outfits. And she was like, I can live with that. So that was kind of how it started, and had a funny story getting back in touch with the Spanish ranch where I had worked, in my earlier days. And that was the first one I went to, and, just kind of rolled on from there. It was, it was everything you'd dream it was, just kind of an excuse to go to every kind of great outfit I ever wanted to visit.
That's awesome. I've kind of got a same, wild hair at my ass to do something of the similar deal, but instead of photography and writing, do it in podcast form and kind of do like like a documentary series. I mean, I'd like very much inspired by the documentary that y'all did. I mean, I had the idea before I saw your film, but I was like, no, that's how it should be done. Like if we're gonna document the cowboy, that's the best I've seen it done in all the films that I've seen. And I was like, you guys really nailed like not only the romance of cowboying, because there is a lot of that to it, but most of it it's boredom throughout the day, boredom, but you're also on edge all the time, especially if you're riding young horses. You can't let your guard down for very long, or you can get in a real pickle. Yep. And so you're a mixture of like boredom and adrenaline kind of all the time, and it's I thought you guys really captured the kind of the essence of what cowboy life is, and or at least in a way that I haven't seen anybody else do it. Before.
No, and I appreciate that, and that was certainly, me and Bud, that was our intention going into it. Was the word we used most was authentic. We wanted an authentic film about the working cowboy. And so, like, these cowboys sit around in bunkhouses and they watch Westerns and they love to pick them apart. Yep. If you've ever done, like, every little thing that's wrong, it's a different gray horse than that guy was riding last time. And, any
the hell bitch is actually a gelding.
Yeah, exactly. So our notion was, don't want there to be a single thing in there that the guys in the bunkhouse, can pick apart. And there might be one or two of the tiniest little things, and I know where they are, but they are, minor in the grand scheme of things. But that was really the notion behind it. And it's like, I hope the outside world appreciates it, to really get a chance to kind of see. And obviously we focused on the big outfits, even though those smaller outfits are every bit as authentic, do the same kind of work. It was just, we focused in on kind of the subculture of the big outfit cowboy. But, the audience was the cowboy world, like that they would watch it and say, yeah, this is what our life is all about. And like that, certainly for me, because, that's the world I grew up in, like that's what mattered.
Well, I can tell you there's like certain, the fella from the YP was just an excellent interview. I mean, he was just a very compelling character, but there was one scene, and I thought you guys really, and I'm no filmmaker by any means, but it was just, I say this because it's still just, I can see it clear as day in my head. I believe it was the outfit over in Oregon, but there was an Indian kid riding a paint horse that bust into, and I was like, was it on the Spanish? Okay. And it was just the perfect essence of like the young working cowboy. Cause like you didn't have the dramatic music and like a slow, like freeze frame. No, you just let it play out. And that kid bucks back and forth. And every time he's got a big grin on his face and he's talking shit to his buddies as he bucks by him, and I was like, that's cowboy shit there. Yeah. That is like the essence of cowboy shit.
Yeah, no, that's Junior Harney. His dad's a well-known buckaroo, Woody Harney. When I went to the TS for the book, Woody was the buckaroo boss on the TS. And then I can't remember where I first met Junior. It might have been on the Spanish Ranch, but Woody and Junior were both working there. And, they're interviewed side by side, father and son.
Yeah.
Later. And, Junior, he's like, I don't know if he's calmed down. I haven't seen Junior for a couple of years now, but he definitely one of those, buckaroos with a real wild hair. And, he loved riding bucking horses. And he's a great guy as well. And one of those, great Indians off the res that, he could ride, he could rope. He was just a good hand all the way around. And knew the job and did it well. Yeah. No, good guy. Junior and Woody both.
That's yeah, that was a really cool scene. I was like, no, that's as cowboy as it gets, because there wasn't anything dramatic about it. It was just he's sitting up there like he belonged there, gave that horse his head, and then was chirping at at everybody else as he bucked in front of him. That's perfect.
Yeah, no, every guy that's ever worked on working ranch, certainly those big outfits, has seen that scene 100 times, where like, all right, I'm riding the green horse in my string this morning, let's get it over with first thing, which is exactly what he was doing. So
yeah, I was talking with a buddy the other day, and we were kind of going over that same thing. It's just like part of horsemanship and animal handling. Like, you always want to do the least amount of stress, but like regardless of how good you are, there's always some stress on your animals. So it's not no stress, it's low stress. And sometimes the lowest amount of stress is just like, I know we're going to have a fight today, so let's get it over right now, because we got shit to do. And that's the thinking behind it. And a lot of times us guys in the cowboy world will get looked down upon for the horsemanship side of things, and like, yeah, okay, but you people don't actually work on a horse. Like, you go to shows and stuff, or you rodeo or whatever, or you go on trail rides. No, like, we're using this animal to get a job done, and we do that every day. And so it's a different type of horsemanship, but it's horsemanship just the same.
Yeah, no, it's funny. I can't hardly ride a horse if it's not, towards accomplishing a task. So a friend invited me out to ride here just the other week. It's the first time I'd probably ever ridden in Austin. And it was just kind of wandering around in a pasture. And it was just had almost zero appeal to me. Like, if there's not a purpose to my riding, I just doesn't hold any interest. And I think if you've cowboyed and a horse is part of getting the job done and moving cows and whatever else, or even if you're just covering country, you're going somewhere where there's a purpose at the end of it. Because I do love trotting out in the morning. It's like my favorite part of the day. But there's still a purpose to your riding. I can't hardly do it otherwise.
I agree. We same conversation as me and Tommy Gassell. We're talking, and that's same way. I don't ride for pleasure anymore. Like, it's if I'm not doing a job. I mean, I could be on a day off or whatever, and have somebody be like, "Hey, you want to go gather a couple cows?" Fuck yes, I will. I work in a feedlot, so like anytime I get a chance to get outside and do a job is great. But when I'm going in the desert, it's to put miles on my horses anymore. Like, that's that once I ride out the feedlot gate, I'm not doing it for fun. It's to put an attitude adjustment on get a little reset on my horse's head.
Yeah,
and
which is riding with a purpose to me. Even though you're not moving cows, like, there's a reason you're riding this horse.
Yeah, but if somebody says, "Do you want to go on a ride Saturday?" No, not really.
No, me either. I don't. I mean, I did it, and I knew I wasn't really going to like it. I mean, of course, I'm throwing my saddle on the back of a horse, and you're swinging into the saddle, and you move. I mean, that part's nice, but it's just, man, that fades so quickly. And it's funny, I feel the same way on my motorcycle. Like, these people will go on a day ride for the sake of riding your motorcycle around. If I'm not going on a long trip with some kind of destination, and just, it doesn't need to be anywhere with a purpose, but you've got some destination, like on a longer trip, I have the same feeling. Like, just going on a joyride doesn't appeal to me that much. And I know it's because it's transitioned over. I feel the same way about motorcycles as I do about horses. I just need some purpose to it. It's as much as I enjoy riding a motorcycle or just riding a horse, like the physical act of it, if it's not coupled with a purpose, that just loses something that's unappealing.
Well, yeah, and part of that goes back to my horses. Is like they got a job just as much as I do, and we're doing that job together.
Yeah.
And if we're not, like, if it's not a branding pin or a roping or something, they need a day off just as much as I do. And if if I'm just riding them to ride them, that's it seems wasteful. It's putting extra miles on a horse that don't need to be there.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even think of it in terms of, what they want. It's just like, for me, it doesn't appeal.
Yeah.
Well, but obviously you get these ranch horses, they aren't interested in just wandering around either. They want to work every bit as much as a cowboy does.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the more you ride them, the more wear you put on them. I mean, it's just the same as riding a motorcycle. Just with every mile comes a little more wear. And yeah, if you're using them to get a job done, like, you use them to get the job done, and then let them have their time off.
Yeah, yep.
But it's a really a crazy history and just a wild lifestyle. And it's been said, I think, probably since the first Spaniards brought cattle over to the Americas, like that working cattle a horseback was a dying breed, because technology was always advancing, and they were, there was something that always was changing. They're like, pretty soon these cowboys won't be needed. And I don't know if you'll ever really get rid of a guy a horseback working cows. I think that's always gonna. I don't know what the ranch type setting will be in the future, but I don't. I think the cow and the horse are almost they're you can't tear them apart anymore. I mean, once a guy figured out how to work a cow horseback like that, that's it. That's the best way to do it.
I mean, I have spent so many hours thinking about, the longevity of the cowboy, and, all the predictions of the demise of, the horseback cowboy. I mean, you think about it, after the trail drives, they said, that's it. The working cowboy horseback's dead. The invention of barbed wire, they're dead. And there's always kind of the next thing that was going to kill them, and
the bumper pull trailer.
Yeah. I mean, so here's my take on it, and it's somewhat consistent with yours. And again, and I've watched it now, like, basically through a generation. Start when I was 12, I'm 60 now, so that's 48 years of having kind of watched the cowboy world. And there have been some changes. Like, there is no doubt about it. And some of them I lament. Like, so there's still big outfits, that run, let's call it 5 to 10 or 11,000 mother cows, and require a full crew of horseback cowboys to get the work done, to do all the cycle of getting through a cow from, birth to the market. And there's probably, like, we've lost a few big outfits over the years because they get busted up, and the family, the person that kept it together dies and the kids sell it off, but not that many. And there's a couple that have been put together since then, like Singleton's is a classic example. It's up around 1 million acres, not all contiguous. And Henry Singleton started putting that together in our lifetime, but there's not many big outfits being assembled. So, I mean, there's still a lot of places running that many cows on big open country, a full crew of horseback cowboys. And to what you said, like, when it comes to these big outfits, there is no better way to gather and work a big group of cows than doing it a horseback, because a horse has the same ability that a cow does, and a cow doesn't want you steering its destiny towards a feedlot and ultimately, a packing plant. So it's gonna, try and outsmart you every step of the way. There is no machine that can keep up with a cow with that mindset. And I don't think, the market will ever invent one, because there's not enough demand to justify someone investing all that bandwidth into coming up with a machine that's that agile when you got a horse and you got a bunch of men and women that love doing it a horseback. With that being said, there have been some dramatic changes in the cowboy world. And so Boots, in an interview I heard him, he said, someone asked him, and it might have been when we screened that film last, what's the biggest change? He said the cell phone, which kind of surprised me, although I get it. And he said, it used to be like you just needed to know your place in a big pasture, and you just needed to know where the other guys were around you. And, you needed to make sure you kept an eye on the person to your right and your left, and you didn't get in front of them or drop too far behind. And, you needed to sort of know the country. He said, now you just pick up a phone and you call them, where are you at? How many do you have? And you can sort of coordinate like a big gather by cell phone. To me, the bigger change has been the truck and trailer, which you referenced. Like when I was cowboying in the 70s and 80s, there were obviously trucks and trailers, but they weren't an intimate part of or they weren't a commonplace part of most of these big outfits. Like once in a blue moon, you'd load your horses in a trailer and go to the far side of the ranch and do something out there. 9 times out of 10, you trotted out in the morning, and your day would start with, a 2-hour trot to get to where you started working. And I loved it. It was my favorite part of the day, because it was the one time that you could let your guard down a little, especially if you were on a broken horse. And you just, you're riding with a crew of 15 guys, you're at a high trot, across big, beautiful open country, and your mind could wander a little. Like it was cool, and the horses were blowing, steam out of their nose, and you could hear the spurs, the rows of the spurs. It's just magical, and
you get to enjoy the sunrise and
all of that. And I will say now, almost no one trots out. It's reversed. 20% of the time they'll trot out, 80% of the time they load their horses in a truck and trailer, and it's absolutely at the expense of that trot in the morning. The other thing that that the trailer killed was the wagon. Now instead of they just trailer to the far side of the ranch, instead of taking a wagon out there and setting up, on those big outfits, you'd typically camp about 4 days in a single spot, and then you'd move, and you may or may not move that far to your next spot. But, and you were out at least 4 weeks, usually 5, kind of moving every 4 days, to get everything branded. The trailer killed it. There's still a few wagons left. Arizona, as Greg Snow says in the film, still have some meaningful wagons that stay out for a long time and with a real purpose. Most of them, it's the ranch owners kind of just doing it for the sake of, keeping the tradition alive. Like those to me, so the truck and trailer, because it had such a profound impact on 2 really important aspects of cowboying, that morning trot out and the wagon. I think that's been the biggest change that I've seen. But with that being said, all those young buckaroos and those young cowboys on all those outfits, from Texas all the way to northern Nevada and Montana, they're the same type of guys that were going to big outfits when I was doing it in 1975, got the same wild hair. Some of them grew up on ranches, some of them didn't, some of them leave it after, 6, 7, 8, 9 years of doing it and go into something else. Some of them stick with it. I don't know if there's any more or less. I bet there's no fewer of those kind of guys drifting around to these big outfits than there was, 40, 50 years ago. So all the books, Last of a Breed, The Dying Cowboy, I kind of like they were saying that in the 60s and 70s. Hell, Will James, was writing about the demise of the big outfit drifting cowboy, and they're still out there. There's still a bunch of them out there. All those guys in the film, every last one of them, every guy in my book, are all those same drifting cowboys, and they're the exact same type of guys that were in Bank Langmore's book and Bill Allard's book and Kurt Marcus's book, and even, by the way, some of the exact same guys like Wade Cooper and Jack Cooper, and some of them still at it. Not many, but few.
Yeah, it's a fascinating look back at it when you look at how, I mean, like the beef boom of the 1860s and 70s, that like just the sheer amount of cattle that they had running wild in Texas after the Civil War. I mean, it was like the perfect explosion of just like, market economy, seeing a hole that needed filled, and a whole bunch of men that needed a job after the Civil War. And there was, but not many of them, like you said, not many of them stuck with it. It has always been a few that, yeah, it is a tough job.
It's a tough way of life, man. It is amazing how few guys that I cowboyed with stuck with it till the end. Like, I caught up with a lot of them on Facebook, and man, a lot of them went to work in the mines. Some of them became like ranch real estate brokers. I mean, there is not but a handful that stuck with big outfits till the end. One of them, like one of the few I know, I mean, Boots, obviously, but I didn't work with Boots when I was younger. One of the only ones I know, and I know I'm missing some, but he was such a close friend and stuck with it, is a guy named Wade Cooper. That's the Buckaroo boss on part of the ZX Ranch in Paisley, Oregon. He was at Binion's my first summer I got there. So he was like one of the first working cowboys I ever saw in my life. We're still friends to this day. On my last big motorcycle ride, I just showed up at his house in Paisley. And it was great to catch up. It was on a Sunday, so I figured I'd catch him at home. And I did. Yeah, so it's it's hard to stick with, and obviously the pay and all of that is a tough deal. And how do you retire as a cowboy? And Gary Morton talks about that in the film. How tough that is, as does Boots. And Jim Brooks, that legendary big outfit cowboy from Montana. He was a hell of a bronc rider, Jim Brooks. But same deal, Jim stuck with it till the end, and then, tried to kind of, cobble together a life around horses in the meantime, doing workshops and, singing in a cowboy band and all of that. And that's what happens to most of these guys. They stick with the horse world, but they move off the big outfits, like Brian Newbert, kind of horse trainer and doing clinics and all that.
Well, I mean, Lottie Mitchell is a perfect example too.
Yeah,
went from big outfit to being full-time cowboy poet, and then getting the cowboy on his terms, I guess.
Yeah, but you're no longer drawing a paycheck from the big outfits. I mean, you get to go in and do it, and I put myself in that category. Like, I'm not drawing a paycheck, and there's a whole different deal when you aren't drawing a paycheck. And there's no, you don't have the responsibility to get the job done, and you can float in and float out and help them brand, or show up and go out with a wagon for a week. It's just a lot different than those guys that draw a paycheck till the very end. It's a rare group of people, because it's a damn hard way of life. I mean, Boots O'Neill's breaking his femur as he's hitting 90. How many people are willing to do that? There's not, you could count on one hand the number of men or women that are that kind of tough and committed to that, to do it till the end. I get it. I didn't, I left it.
Yeah. Well, it's just try to picture another 90-year-old even stepping on a horse on their own accord. Like most of them are in a walker or a wheelchair by 90 years old. And and yeah, he he said every now and then one of the young bucks will throw a saddle up there for him. Just he said they don't need to, but I'm not going to tell them not to either.
Yeah,
So.
right. Yeah, no,
And,
it's it's sort of like, you hit 60 and you can still wrestle calves if you're at a place where they wrestle calves. But if someone's like, hey, why don't you brand? It's like, yeah, I'm happy to brand instead of wrestle calves,
Yeah, that's exactly right. I listening to you talk on the trot out in the morning, I agree that's one of the best feelings is and I've been in the feedlot now for when I start 09, so coming up on like 12, 13 years of full-time, in the feedlot cowboy. And like shipping days are like that, where you trot out to get, and you're not going for 2 hours before you get, where you're going, obviously, but you've got like the full morning ahead of just loading and shipping cattle, and it's all fast paced because those trucks are on a schedule and everybody's on a schedule, and like fall and like spring, early mornings when it's still just real crisp in the air, and your blood's pumping, and you're usually on a good horse because you got to get a job done, and the shipping and weighing cattle is one of the it's a prime spot to get in a wreck because you're just cramming a bunch of cattle into a small space, and so you want a good horse under you, so you're on edge a little bit, but your horse knows what to do, and you're just kind of in the zone, and it's I love those mornings like that. It's like you get a workout right first thing, and it's and you can still, like, as you're trotting to get the next pin, you can enjoy the sunrise a little bit too, and it's
that's like, there is romance to it. And again, we didn't want to overdo the romance in the film or in the book, but it's there.
You can't discount it.
Yeah, no, it is obviously what draws, like, anyone that's gone to the cowboy world that wasn't raised in it, they're drawn there by the romance. Now, most of them, like, once the reality of what a hard way of life it is sets in, it drives the vast majority off. But then there are those that, like, they like the hard bit as much as they like the romance. But, like, what takes you there is this notion of the freedom of, being out there and being a horseback and, like, just nothing but a day's work in front of you. And, you finish one day's work, it seldom rolls over into the next day. The only thing you ever worry about tomorrow is what horse might be up in your string, and if it's one that's going to give you a hard time. But one day ends and that's it, man. Like, you get an office job as a lawyer or whatever, you work on projects that keep you anxious for 3 months, and you're worrying about stuff 3 months down the road. A cowboy, it's like the day ends, you go to, you crawl into your bedroll with a clean mind. It's just, you aren't worried about tomorrow. It just starts fresh every day. And I got to tell you, man, that is a wonderful way to live your life. Like, that to me is part of the romance, in addition to the big open spaces and all of that. And being a horseback all day is a great deal, but it's just this, life kind of one day at a time you just can't overstate, how good that is for the soul.
Yeah, it really is. And it's funny. I don't know how many times some of my friends that, either run their own ranches or just guys that are not in the cattle business at all, they'll ask me about the cattle market, and I'm like, man, I don't know. I just go, I punch cows, man. I don't worry about the market. Like, I'll hear about it here and there, but if you ask me what live cattle we're bringing that day, I'm like,
those are the people that have to worry about the longer term stuff, like the ranch owners and ranch managers. They don't get I'm talking about the working cowboy.
Yeah.
It's hey, do you mind if we take like a 20-second break?
Yeah.
I'm going to run to the restroom and come right back.
That'll work. We're almost at an hour, so we'll call that for the main show. So where can they find you on social media and find your work and whatnot?
Yeah. No, I mean, I'm on Facebook. You can just type my name in. Instagram, I don't do too much. I do more of I put more effort into Facebook, which is just my name. And then, of course, I have a website for my photography, johnlangmorephotos.com. And, you can find the book Open Range on Amazon, and the film is also on Amazon, Cowboys. You just type in Cowboys, a documentary portrait, and you can find it and watch it.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate your time, John. We'll let him I'll let you go, but we're
going to come back or?
Yeah, we'll come back and do another 20 minutes if that's all right.
Okay, yeah, sure. No, absolutely. I'll be 20 seconds.
All right. So that's John Langmore, everybody. Appreciate him coming on. If you'd like to hear the rest of this, go to patreon.com/Burnin Daylight. And thanks for listening. Now move your ass. We're burning daylight.
Your eyes up in the morning beneath the stars so bright. Pull your hat down, make sure your cinch is tight. Horses kinda snuffy, cold chill up your spine. We'll get your ass moving, son, we're burning daylight. Burning daylight. Burning daylight. In the saddle till the job's done right. Is just a gather, and you won't catch 'em all. But when you ride through the gate, make sure you sit up tall. I can see the horizon, it's looking pretty bright. Well, get your ass moving, son, we're burning daylight. Burning daylight. Burning daylight. In the saddle till the job's done right. Burning daylight. Burning daylight. Burning daylight.
All right, we're back with John Langmore.
I got to tell you, Matt, your title, Burning Daylight, Move Your Ass. It's like just hearing those words, move your ass, kind of makes me uptight, because in the cowboy world, like, that's what a boss yells at you when you screwing up somehow. And I've had that yelled at me before. And like just hearing those words, it's funny how it like brings back this feeling of, oh shit, I'm in the wrong place, or I'm doing something wrong, and the cow boss is chewing my ass out. Move your ass.
You get to daydreaming a little bit, and your horse steps over 2 seconds too late or whatever, and it's
it's funny. Just those words, they're like, have a certain kind of power behind them. If you've ever had them yelled at you when you're out working on a ranch.
It's funny is John Wayne's kind of almost untouchable in the cowboy world, but the one film that he just really nailed was the Cowboys, and it was just a bunch of young boys learning how to cowboy, and just how hard he was on them. And like everybody knows, whether it's their old man or the cow boss or whatever, like everybody knows one of those type of characters, that the Mr. Anderson types that just like rides your ass, but he's fair as they come, and also he's right there with you every step of the way. Like he's not sending you out to do something just because you're the new guy. No, it's because we got a job to do, and he's as big a part of that as you are, but he don't let you slack.
Yeah, no, it's funny. I've had both of those, by the way. So like that first summer, I went to Binion's Ranch. You know, I was 12 years old. My dad got me a week of riding lessons to prepare me for a summer of cowboying on a big outfit. You know, I didn't know anything. Every piece of gear I had was brand new. I'd ridden a horse around in a pen for a week. And so Benny's first job for me was I would gather all the horses out of the horse pasture and take them out onto the road, which had a fence on either side, and I'd graze them along the road all day long. You know, I'd come back in for lunch, put them in the corral, and then take them back out after lunch and bring them back in at the end of the day while they were off, you know, working cows. And man, I was pissed. And just, you know, I'd sit out there and cuss Benny all day, every day. And I got bucked off once by this horse that I just couldn't ride. And I was out day herding those horses, and he bucked me off, and I got knocked out. And when I came to, there was not a horse in sight. And I could see a long way down the road, both ways, east and west, like, oh my God. I've lost the whole remuda of horses. Like, I have lost every saddle horse that belongs to Benny Binion. Like, that's it, I'm done. Not my horse, you know, he's out there somewhere with a saddle on him. And here comes some guy down the road in a pickup truck, and he sees me standing there, you know, in all my new gear, 12-year-old kid, you know, kind of dumbfounded. And he pulls over and says, I'm betting that bunch of horses and that one with a saddle that I just passed back there belong to you. I'm like, yeah, no, I bet they do. And so he, you know, loaded me up and took me back, and I was able to catch that horse Sport. And man, I brought those horses back, and I never mentioned it to anyone. I didn't tell anyone what had happened till years later. So they're like, they would send me out for the nothing chop. And then eventually one day Benny said, all right, you know, saddle up today and you're going to, you know, ride with Wade. He's going to take you somewhere. And I kind of just, you know, cleared the hurdle. I also, though, like on the bit of like a hard boss and you got a job to do, there's a guy named Bill Kane. Have you ever heard of Bill Kane on the Spanish Ranch?
I've heard the name. I'm sure I've heard some stories about him.
You know, he was the buckaroo boss on the Spanish Ranch forever. Definitely a legendary cowboy. And I think I went out with their wagon when I was like 15. And I had a horse, and you had to shoe your own horses. And I had a horse in my string. I couldn't get shoes on him. You know, I just wasn't up to the task. You know, he'd jerk his foot down, and I was nervous, and I didn't really know how to shoe a horse that well. And I like got a couple of shoes tacked on his front feet, and he threw them the same day that I rode him, the first day I rode him. And Bill was so pissed off. And he said, you aren't riding out today. You know, and this is on the wagon. Like, worst thing in the world is to stay back at the wagon while the whole crew rides out. You know, ran. You aren't going anywhere until you get shoes on that horse. And I spent the whole day, you know, back at the wagon, and I couldn't get shoes on this horse. And thank God, one of the other guys, I wish I could remember who it was, came back and they saw I hadn't shod this horse, and they took pity on me, and they said, man, I'll shoe your horse. I probably gave him a wild rag or something, you know. But, you know, Bill didn't care how I got him shod. If I, you know, if I could convince someone else to do it for me, then fine. But he was so pissed, and I felt about that big, you know, not being able to shoe my own horses. He was tough. He and Benny Binion both were tough guys to work for. But man, you know, once they see you don't quit, like that's all it takes. You don't have to be a top hand, you know. And I tell anyone that talks about wanting to go work on a ranch, like, you don't really need to know that much. You know, you just need to have your gear. But what you got to be willing to do is do whatever they ask you to do with a good attitude, you know, and just keep trying and push through it all. And man, you know, they'll, as long as you keep doing that, they'll keep you on.
Yeah. And you'll get those comments like, well, I don't know what you're good for, but we'll keep you around or whatever. And
yeah. And you just got to be
and
willing to live with that, and be like, and be sort of, and obviously, look, there are also some of those guys that were mean as hell. Like I had some bosses that I didn't like. They were just mean, and they'd get after you. That was the minority. The vast majority, like it was what you were describing at the outset, like John Wayne towards those young guys, he'd be hard on you, but he was trying to turn you into something that could get the job done. It was like they had a goal in mind, and they just needed to know that you'd lived through that piece of it. And if you did, then once you got to the certain place, they'd ease up on you and they'd start helping you. And they'd say, hey, let me show you how you do this. You're kind of going at this the wrong way. And the first time they do that for you, that they respect your try, that they're like, okay, now I'm going to take the time to teach you something. And that's like when, all right, I sort of cleared the hump.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And it's funny how many guys that have been led by like some of those tough but fair guys, like when they go to town, they're a whole different type of guy. But like they'll get in a fight first thing, or they'll they're kind of the dregs of society. But once they ride out in the morning, like they live by that the cowboy code. Like it's I don't know. It's funny how some of the best hands are like the worst people in town. But like once you get them back on the horse, like they're like, you got guys that look up to them, and for good reason.
Yeah. No, and it's funny because most of those guys that are like that, that really they just want to be out on an outfit. Like when they're young, they want to go into town and drink and get wild, and chase cows. As they get older, those type guys, they just stay out on the ranch. There's nothing for them in town, and they'll go in for a rodeo, the Big Loop rodeo in Jordan Valley or something like that. But on the whole, they're content to leave the city to itself, and even town for that matter. Just be out where they feel comfortable, and they know they've got the respect of all the guys working for them, and they aren't trying to convince anybody of who they are.
Yeah, that's a good moment in your career when you can you're not trying to prove you're cowboy anymore. Like when you just know, it's like, well, I don't care if anybody calls me cowboy. I make my living on horseback, and that's this essentially the definition of it. And I don't have to get a bigger hat to prove somebody. I don't have to, I don't have to make my horse spin all the time just to show off how good of a horseman I am. Like, no, I know I'm comfortable with where I'm at. I'm better than a lot of guys, and there's a lot of guys that are better than me. So I'm good with where I'm at. But I cowboy for a living.
And honestly, I mean, that same mindset applies just in life in general. There is some, it's like the people that get that kind of inner peace of just being comfortable with who they are, whether they're great at something or not, is just, that's something you can always appreciate. But definitely on an outfit, it's a good thing. And especially if you like, if you move around between outfits a lot, to be able to go to a new outfit and not feel like you got to prove to them right off the get-go by doing something fancy, making some, like sticking some spurs in your horse that you could talk them out of pitching. But, if you want to stick your spurs in them and make a bronc ride, you could, or, if you want to show off some horsemanship, it's a great feeling, like when you don't feel a need to do any of that. And especially, like I say, when you go to a new outfit, none of those guys know you, but you're content to let it take a week for them to sort of realize what you're about. And it's, one thing I will say about cowboying, as you well know, is you can't fake it.
No,
because everything you do is on display. Like, I mean, the second you, like if someone ropes your horse and they lead it to you, and then, you know, you put your halter on and you do what you do, if it's the rope corrals up in Nevada or whatever, they can tell, like in about 10 minutes, have you done this before? What you're, much less when you throw your saddle on and you swing on for the first time, or you get behind a bunch of cows, you can't hide your level of skill, you know, and it's just, which I love. It just creates a very honest set of, you know, it creates a certain honesty in people that you're working with, because they know, I mean, there's always guys that'll overtalk their ability. You know, they're always out there, and on these big outfits, you always come across them. And it's kind of funny because within a week, you know, like you're talking beyond your skill level. Most of them, what it does, it takes that out of you, and you're just, you know, you're just very honest about where you're at in terms of, you know, your ability as a cowboy. Whereas any other professional life, you know, people, you can fake it for 3 years as a lawyer, you know, you can't fake it for 3 minutes as a cowboy.
Ask any leather maker how long they faked it for, because there's a lot of them. It's like, man, I just threw some shit together and marketed the shit out of it, you know. And then you can't. The bullshit gets stripped away pretty quick when you swing a leg over, you know. It's
yeah, no, and I mean it's like it's an aspect of cowboying I really deeply appreciate, you know, that that you can't fake it, you know what I mean? And it's hard, like and obviously the other side of that same coin is, you know, if you've got a deficiency, it's going to be apparent. Like if you're not a great roper, that's going to be obvious at your first branding, and you got to kind of live with that, you know. And it's a little painful not to be, you know, hellacious with a rope when you want to be, you know, and you've roped long enough that you should be, but you're not. Like you got to kind of, it takes like some inner fortitude to live with that, you know, as a working cowboy. And again, especially if you're like one of those guys that drifts around between these big outfits, and especially, by the way, which so few do this. And it's funny, I've been thinking about this. I wish more guys would do this. I think I'm going to make a Facebook post about this. Like those more buckaroos ought to go down to Arizona or New Mexico or Texas, and more Texans ought to go up to buckaroo country or Montana and get outside your comfort zone. And it's pretty hard at first, because there is no question, like, and you got to find out how much of your gear you want to adapt. Because if you show up with a spade bit in Texas, you know, they won't let you on a horse. You know, you got to make some adaptations, and you wouldn't want a thin pair of chinks in brush country, you know, but maybe you get a pair of bat wings and you get a curb bit, but you keep your flat hat, you know. And the outfits you talk about that you worked on are, you know, the YP, the TS, the Span, you know, the Wine Cup Gamble. And, you know, if you got a great attitude, they will embrace you, you know. And the problem is so few of them, you know, they want to kind of overdo where they came from, and you got to be super humble, and especially because of the horses that they might cut you if you talk, you know, if you talk too much smack. But like watching the way, like, and I've been to all these outfits, not necessarily because I worked on all of them, but for the sake of the film and the book. And man, it is fascinating, like having buckarooed, to go watch how these, you know, tie hard and fast guys do it in New Mexico and Texas, and vice versa. Like I know Boots O'Neill, like he may never adapt a long rope and dallies, but I know he would love watching how these buckaroos do it. And he called me once and said, hey man, can you put me in touch with one of those buckaroo bosses up there? Because I want to talk to them about how they get those horses to line up along those rope corrals. Like, I think that's fascinating. And I loved that Boots had that curiosity about how the buckaroos do it. And I love, like, when I've screened the film up in buckaroo country, and they'll pick out something that they saw happen on Singletons or Tongue River, and they'll say, wow, man, so now tell me how they do that down there, you know? Like, I love that kind of crossbreeding among buckaroos and punchers and, you know, Montana cowboys. And I moved around between all those outfits myself, and I loved it. You know, it's a little hard up front because they're kind of hard on someone that's different. But once you sort of get over the hump, you know, they'll start asking you questions like, hey, so, you know, you worked on the Spanish ranch. What's Phil Kane like? You know, are those horses on the span really as gnarly as everyone says? You know, they want to know.
Yeah, it's really incredible. Since I've been doing this podcast for, I guess it'll be 4 years in June, and I come from Southeast Colorado, Dust Bowl country. You know, like that's my house is about 40 miles from Boise City, Oklahoma, which was considered the geographical center of the Dust Bowl, and not much has changed in that amount of time. It's still pretty much Dust Bowl, but it was a different style of cowboy than what we did there because it was all quarter section, half section, and once you got over towards like Pritchett Kim area in that Three Corners area where we were talking before, where it drops off into canyon country, that's kind of the start of BLM. And then the further west you go, the more it opens up. But I never really cowboyed down in Texas much, a little bit in the Panhandle, but it was, you know, and there's some bigger ranches in the Panhandle for sure, but it's still a lot like where I grew up, where it's just quarter section, half section, and mostly family owned, you know, run, you know, big operational, run 500 to 1,000 head of mama cows, but pretty small scale, but everybody did it. Like, and you know, so you could go to multiple different Brandons in a year, and and everybody just kind of traded help. And then after college, I went up to Montana, and that was the biggest cow outfit that I worked on. I mean, no, I'll get into that, but then. So the biggest outside cow operation was the IX up in Big Sandy, Montana, and it was about 3,000 mama cows. Me and my ranch foreman, we cabbed out about 700 head of mama cows, and I spent the coldest part of the year up in Montana. I got up there, I think January 31st, and I left on May 5th, and that cured me of wanting to live in Montana.
Yeah, forget it.
I felt like Monty Walsh, you know, warming calves up next to the wood stove. We had a gas heater in the bunkhouse, but it was run off a farm tap, and the lines would, if it ran out of methanol, you know, the lines would freeze up, and then you'd wake up and you'd have about a half inch of just icicles on your chest or frost from your breath. Just stacked up on your chest, but it got really cold, but that was one of my first experiences with a bigger outfit, and then I moved back home. I went to work for Five Rivers outfit in Ulysses, Kansas, 120,000 head feedlot, like big, and maybe that's something I one piece of criticism on your Cowboys movie, because I think a lot of people don't realize how, like, the big outfits on the feedlot side of things too. Like when you get into those 100,000 head corporate feed yards, like you're talking about a lot of cattle, man. I added it up one time, and I counted 1 million head of cattle in a 9-month period. You know.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. Well, so I will say, it's funny. There was a woman whose, I think his name was Busher. Was something. He ran the feedlot on the TS, and his wife came up and said, you know, all y'all always want to, like, you know, photograph or film the guys a horseback, the big outfit side. Like, y'all need to come in and do something on the feedlots. And, you know, that's a whole other world that's like critical to like, if there weren't feedlots and guys working in those feedlots, you know, there wouldn't be any place for those, like those ranches wouldn't exist for those guys to be big outfits. And I completely appreciated what she had to say and what you are saying. And my thing to her was like, I don't know that world. That's just not I'm
Mhm.
doing something that I appreciate. It's not because it's the more romantic version of it. It's just the world I knew,
Yeah.
like feedlot world's just totally foreign to me. Someone should do that. It just ain't going to be me, but I'm with you. There's no reason that story shouldn't be told, because it's fascinating in its own way and has its own
and
dangers and this and that.
it's not a real criticism of you. I'm just saying, like, if there was one, that's what I'd say. But I get where it doesn't fit that film, because that's, like I said, that's not the world. So it's not an actual criticism, but I do think that people would really enjoy seeing the intimate details of feedlot, because it does mirror the outside, from like the small family owned stuff to the big, and which most of these big outfits are corporate outfits anymore.
Yeah, they are.
Whether it's feedlot or ranch, like the true big outfits are corporate, and but there's still some young cowboy that does the dirty work from day to day, and and so it really is a mirror image of it, just the same job, but in a completely different world.
Yeah, and I will say, it's like the book and the film are about the big outfit cowboys. I don't want to be perceived as like elevating big outfit cowboys above all the rest of the working cowboys. And it's actually a really important point to me. I wish I'd probably said this earlier in this, in case folks have dropped off. Because of those people, feedlot is its own world. So let's just talk about the ranching side of it.
Mm-hmm.
Like all those family ranches and those smaller places, like the ones that, you grew up working on or spent most of your time working on, every bit is authentic. It's the same, cycle of work, calving in the early spring, branding in the late spring and summer, weaning in the fall, shipping in the fall, just keeping all of the infrastructure in order during the winter. Like that cycle is the same, whether it's a 13,000 acre ranch, or a 1.3 million acre ranch.
Mm-hmm.
Like all that work is the same. Those guys are just as good a hand on that place that has less acreage. Like the big outfit thing, to me, it was really just a function of, again, like the world that I came out of. That's what I did as a kid. That's what I wanted to go, those places where you never had to step off a horse, and and I was only doing it for the summer, so I was kind of cheating in a way. But it's not, it's no more romantic. It's no more authentic. Like those big outfits produce less beef in terms of U.S. output than do those smaller family ones by a fair margin. The only thing I will say is, like, my entree to that world was really Will James books, and Will James was all about that drifting cowboy,
Mm-hmm.
man. They roll up their bedroll and move on to the next place that, just because they could. And it was like, that's what took me into it. And that's the world I fell into and stuck with for that, brief period of time that I did. But it's, no more like romantic, no more authentic, no more nothing. It's just what I chose to document.
Well, speaking of documenting, I mean, like, that's been one of the cooler things about social media, is bringing the cowboy world very more interconnected. And so you have, like, you've had like the 310 Ranch guys that they were originally down in Alabama, doing buckaroo type shit with their ropes and horses. And you get to see some of the tie hard Texas punchers, throwing some really cool hula hands, and showing that, like, hey, just because I'm tied hard doesn't mean I'm blow to them and bust them. It's like, no, I'm going to sneak up here and just give a little,
Yep.
and get that calf. And because he's, it's like it's stalker country. So they're running Florida calves that haven't ever seen a human. The only time they saw a human was when they were getting put on a truck.
Yeah.
And so he's like, I've been, and he says the whole deal, like, I've been riding these just at, keeping them at arm's length for a couple of days, trying to just settle them down. And then there's a sick calf right there. I'm going to slip in here and then just real handy, just real handy, just whoop. And, it's just quick as can be, give him a shot and up he goes. And it's like, that's a guy that knows his abilities, and that's a guy that knows his cattle, and that's
a guy that's
a good cowboy. Yeah, and it was a really, I think they did it for the Western Horseman, and it was just a really well done piece by that guy. And he was sure enough just a puncher. It was back when the 6-inch.
Was it a film?
Yeah, it was like just a little, like a 3-minute video on the Horseman's.
It was out on social media.
Yeah, and he was sure enough puncher, like taco hat, big bat wings, and just, and then tied hard. But he was also a really good cowboy, just whoop, and just quiet, quick, get the job done. It was really cool, and that thing had several million views on it, and you're like, that's awesome. And then you see some of these buckaroo types with their fancy loops, and then also with an explanation of where that loop comes in handy. And so then you get some of those Texas guys saying like, well, that's pretty cool. Maybe I ought to look into that. And it's amazing how many like hybrid cowboys you have, especially among the younger crowd.
Yeah. No, which is, sort of back to like, man, I would so encourage folks to drift around the different states where they do different styles of cowboying. And also, like when you move around, like you got to bear in mind that different styles of cowboying, like they arose because they fulfill a need where it's being used. Like, okay, you use short ropes and you tie on in thick brush country, and you might wear your hat with your brim up, and you wear thick shotgun or batwing shafts in brush country. It's because, when you got a shot at a calf or a cow and it's brief, and you can't, you don't need a long rope, and you aren't going to take time to dally, but you go up to northern Nevada and it's sagebrush. There's not a bunch of thick brush. You can wear a big flat brimmed hat, and you got time to take your dallies, and you can wear chinks because, you aren't riding through thorns. Like there's a reason for all that stuff. And, one's
Split
not
reins versus Rommel, same way. Like you want to be riding a Rommel rein through brush country because
exactly. And you want split reins, and it's, but it's not better or worse. And it's funny because they'll sort of like, I hear Texas cowboys talking about, oh my God, and it's funny. I heard an old timer say it recently, like, man, I watch these guys up north and oh my God, they don't know what they're doing. Or, I know there's supposed to be some good hands. I didn't see any. And it's like, it's just different. It's not better and it's not worse. And it's adapted to its environment. And, there are some top hands in every single state you go to, and with a minor bit of modification, they'd be a top hand anywhere they go. But seeing it all is, I've always just found super fascinating. I've always thought variety is kind of the spice of life. And
I agree.
I would encourage anyone to drift around to different outfits. Like, man, those outfits in Arizona are amazing. Everybody should. I'm really sick I didn't go cowboy on those. I just saw them when I, was working on the book. I went to the Diamond A and the ROs and Babbitt's, for the first time. And man, those are some cool places. God, I wish I would have cowboyed there when I was younger.
I'm in the same boat. I'm married with kids now, so it's those wagon deals are pretty much off the table anymore unless I can finagle my way on for a week or something.
Yeah, right. Same with me. That's where I'm at.
And but like I don't have many regrets in life, and I don't regret doing what I did, but I was like, man, I sure wish I would have spent some time on a wagon, like that. It's just like
It's pretty
yeah.
good, man. I'm not going to try and tell you you shouldn't have, because it was like those were the best times of my life, bar none, man. There's just something so special about going out with a wagon, just being out there in the big wide open with a crew of 12 guys, and you get to rope every day. And, and if it was a team drawn wagon, watching a bed wagon and a chuck wagon roll across the prairie with a team of horses or mules pulling it along, and, 3 guys taking the cavy or the remuda behind, there's something so magical about that. I just, when the school year would end, I could not wait to get out to whatever wagon had hired me on for that summer. I just, like, every second waiting for it was torture. From the moment they said, all right, we got a spot for you on the crew, that was all I thought about from that point forward, man.
It's kind of funny. The closest I had to that experience was so my dad and his buddy, they had this, they called it Kirkwell Cattle Company, and it was trail ride company and we did it out on BLM country there in southeast Colorado, and they're in the Oklahoma Panhandle. And they would take these people in from the city, and we'd go, but we would ride for like 20 miles a day. We'd show them, Picture Canyon, then we'd camp out, move into Box Canyon, the Sand Canyon, Carrizo Canyon, and and we'd end up at Lake Etling in outside of Kenton, Oklahoma, Memorial Day weekend. And they always had a ranch rodeo there when they still had the store there at Lake Etling. But they had a ranch rodeo on the Sunday before Memorial Day, and so we'd come in, like it was you could make the drive in about 40 minutes, something like that, from where we started to where we ended. But we took a week going through all this country, and it was really cool. And we took a wagon and everything. I mean, we had a pickup that followed along behind with food and whatnot, but it was sure enough, like, it wasn't so much cowboy shit. We did, when we'd cross over into Oklahoma, we'd help one of the local ranchers gather some of his cattle. So we did do just a brief amount of cowboy work, but it was more like pioneer shit more than anything. And it was a lot of fun. And the same way, like, I couldn't wait for school to get out. Like, I didn't even particularly like horses at the time. I was a foster kid, and I came from town. It's a small town, but I lived in town. And then I got thrown on not bad horses, but not good horses from the get go. Yeah. And I got to work. I hated it for the longest time. And but I loved that trip, regardless of how much I didn't care for horses. I loved that whole deal, because it was awesome. Just really, really cool. Just something about it.
Yeah, no, if you've done it, you don't need to describe it to me, and I don't need to describe it to you, because you've done it and you know exactly what I'm talking about. There's just something special. I'll tell you, people will say, like, it's one of those fun questions you ask people, like, if you could go back in time, like, what point in time would you go back to? Mine is unequivocal. I've never changed it. Since I was a kid, I'd go back to those cattle drives. Like, if I do one cattle drive from Texas up to some railhead to whichever state it was, absolutely, that is what I would do. And I don't know if you've ever seen that movie, The Culpeper Cattle Company.
I don't think so.
It's a great Western. It's like up there with Monty Walsh and John Wayne and the Cowboys, and and it's about these guys that do, a trail drive, and it really kind of captures it. And it's been a long time since I've seen it, but I think, like, the opening scene, a guy's got his leg up over his, he's kind of resting on his horse, and he's got his leg up over his cantle, and he's spinning the rowel on his spur, and you can just hear that rowel jingling. And I'm like, man, that is so cool. And they're waiting for a bunch of cows to move out. But that is definitely what I would do, you know, all day driving cows with a group of guys camping out at night. And I know it'd be hard, you know, and there's all that other stuff that went along with it. But I'm certain if I had lived then, I would have made my way out of whatever town I lived in to go do one of those drives.
Oh, absolutely. I would I'm kind of in the same boat. I would have go like just post Civil War, you know, like post Civil War Texas, where you're with Charlie Goodnight, get me making a herd, and then driving them up to some fort somewhere, and then making that drive from Texas to Montana, you know, like, I mean, there's a good chance I would have been scalped by Indians, but I look Mexican enough so I could probably pass as an Indian at long glance, but still, there's a good chance I'm going to get scalped. But that's, if I could go back, that's my first. I still think I'd
do it, you know, or you'd have a stampede and you'd get run over in a stampede, you know, or like, I know that it was dangerous. I'm still confident I would have done it, you know, that I would have been one of those guys that could not have resisted the pull of, you know, being a horseback all day, every day behind a herd of cows, you know, spending your time out around a group of other cowboys, you know, sleeping out under the stars. And I probably would have only done one, you know, sort of like, you know, I quit cowboying. I did, you know, I could have said, all right, I'm going to go do it full time. And I didn't, you know, I pursued a professional career. So I might have only done one trail drive, but I'm confident I would have done one, you know?
Yeah.
The only other thing I would have loved, just as much would be like to be a Mustanger, like, you know, the three Mustangers that Will James wrote about, and just go chase wild horses.
I was thinking about that the other day too, that I need to read some more about the Mustangers, but I like everything I've heard about them, even from like the early days to where they were chasing them with planes and shit, you know, just like all of it sounds so much fun.
Man, Wild West, you know, chasing, like I haven't chased wild horses, like, you know, out on the desert, but I've gathered horses, you know. Binion's sold off his cattle, and then, I don't know, probably my last 10 summers there, it was just a horse ranch, and, you know, he had a bunch of stud bunches, and so you'd go gather those stud bunches, and it had the same feel as, you know, like Mustanging, where when they saw riders, when a stud bunch saw riders, man, they were off. And it was just, and there you go, running flat out across the prairie, chasing a group of 45 horses. And man, I am telling you, there is nothing like it. It is the greatest thrill in the world. And I would have just loved to have been a Mustanger, you know, really chase those wild shitters.
You know, that would have been wild too. When I first moved out to Nevada, I took a job over by Fallon, just outside of Fallon at one of those BLM Mustang feedlots.
Yeah.
And I was fairly confident in my abilities as a cowboy going in there, and so they had the BLM guys show up. It was a privately owned deal, but leased to the BLM, and the BLM guys came in to do some work on whatever. I don't even remember exactly what we were doing, but we were sorting out of a bunch of mares, and I was on my good mare. Like she's been through most everything, seen just about everything. And when they got to running, like she's like, what the fuck are we doing? You know, she was, and I've never felt so in the way since I was, you know, young. I'd never felt so in the way, and it was just a whole different thing.
It is, man. Chasing horses it's a wild deal, and oh my God, is it fun. Like, just far and away my favorite aspect of cowboying. As much as I love the wagon and all that, you know, wouldn't trade it for anything, and I love Brandon and all that, but man, you know, chasing horses is there is nothing like it. And I even like, we'd brand colts and we'd mug colts. I love mugging colts. Partly it's because it's horses, and if you're a cowboy, you gotta love horses. It's pretty much it's pretty much about horses. I mean, it's about being outdoors. It's not so much about the cows themselves. They're kind of your excuse to be out there. At least they were.
Mm-hmm.
It was really more about the horses and the big wide open spaces and being around a bunch of like-minded people, men and women that just appreciated cowboying and, just being able to talk about it, like what outfits you like, what bosses you like, who has good horses, but it's horses, horses, horses. So like being on a horse outfit, man, it's just kind of nirvana. It's like you get to chase horses, you get to mug colts, you get to ride every kind of horse from good to bad. God, is it fun. And I was never a hardcore bronc stomper, and if it was a horse was too bad, I wanted it moved out of my strength real quick. But
I rode a lot of
catch up.
Yeah, I rode a lot of nasty horses, but I it wasn't my favorite thing. No. I rode colts for a while, and I'd be lying if I said I wasn't decently sticky, but it was more out of survival than for pure love of doing it. I enjoy the feeling after a bronc ride. If I cover, but I don't like hitting the ground, and that's where I got my stickiness from. It wasn't to show my skill. It was just so I could stay in the middle just long enough till I get their head cranked around and get them circling. That's the extent of my skills. And for that end, I'm fairly decent at it. And, but like, I never was the bronc rider at the rodeo. I didn't care to. I just, like I said, I don't like hitting the ground. I don't like trying to jump off my horse if I don't absolutely have to. I'm there to ride the horse.
Yeah, no, like there's like the guy on the paint horse, Junior Harney. He loves riding bucking horses, and there's some guys out there, Wade Cooper, loved riding bucking horses, certainly in his younger days. I never felt that way. I was always like, if I never had another horse buck with me, I'd be just perfectly fine.
I don't mind one that kicks his heels up first thing in the morning, something that's easy to ride. And I know that they're just, getting the kinks out.
Of course.
But as far as like an actual one that's just going to get after it, I mean, it used to be fun. And I never wanted it. I was not the just swing over and let's go. Like I always had to like stop, like cheek him around, psych myself up a little bit, and then go. And then just like I said, hopefully I can stay on just long enough to where I get their head pulled around and they're circling, and then I'm good. But it was but then there's other guys they'll pick a fight with a horse just because they love to ride a bucking horse.
Exactly. And I was never that guy. I mean, like I say, I'd ride what they cut me, and no problem. I may or may not get bucked off, but like if that's the horse you give me to ride, that's just the rules of the game. I'd ride it, but I was never like, cut me the wild mare's colt.
No, the same here. And I've got an older horse that, he's 16, 17 years old or something like that, but you leave him off for more than a week and he's going to get fresh, and he can't buck very hard, but he's just got like a hard crow hop, and like it's not hard to ride it, but it just bangs your thighs up, and he just like he drops his head. He's got a big long neck, so he drops his head pretty hard and then just hammers you. And I got to where I just don't want to ride that anymore, so I'll whip out the lunge line and jip him around, because like I don't. At this point, like there's just a good a chance I'll throw my back out on that deal.
Right. Yeah, no.
Like he's not gonna buck me off. I can cover him every time, but I hate riding that anymore. So just like get it out, and then we'll go do our thing. And
it was funny when I was doing the book. I'd usually go to those outfits for 10 days at a shot. And I would call them and say, hey, I'm going to need some horses to ride, you know, because I'm going to ride out with you guys. I carried my cameras in these holsters that my dad had made. And so I'd say, you know, that's kind of part of the deal. If I got to have horses to ride to, you know, work on this project, and they were always accommodating. But, you know, and of course I would say whatever horses you have for me are fine, because, you know, that rule that you got to ride whatever they cut you. But I'd sort of like slip in there like, hey, I'm not, you know, like if you give me broke horses, I'm perfectly fine with that, man. It was always like when they cut you a horse out on some ranch you know, where I didn't really know the folks, you're always kind of a little anxious, or they like want to sort of, you know, make a point with you or have a good laugh at your expense. And I will say, you know, I went to 12 outfits for the book before we started on the film, and never had a horse pitch with me. The only time I had a horse pitch was the guys were arguing about who was going to jingle horses on the Spanish ranch. We were out on the wagon, and I love jingling horses, you know, that whole thing, gathering horses. And I'm like, I'll go, you know, I'll go gather them. Oh, great. You know, he wants to go wrangle the horses. And I got on the wrangle horse, which of course you think is the old broke horse. You know, that's what it's supposed to be. That was the only horse that ever bucked with me the whole time. And thank God wasn't yeah, so it was, yeah, I got lucky. I felt very fortunate that no one wanted to kind of have a good laugh at my expense and watch the photographer get bucked off, especially because my cameras are expensive. I did not want to land on them.
Oh, I bet not. Yeah, I was going to ask about that. Did you get the kinks worked out before you loaded your cameras, or no?
You know, I got to where I would. So it was a little bit of a thing. It's funny that you asked that. If, like, I would try to get on and maybe do a quick trot around, like the first time I got on a horse, just to see what it was without my cameras, to make sure if I did get bucked off, you know, that I didn't have my cameras around my waist. The problem was, like, I usually didn't have enough time, and, you know, you can't be the last one ready to go on an outfit. So it was a lot of times like my stuff came together just in time for me to hop on for the first time if I didn't want to keep the crew waiting, you know. And I like having the crew stand around waiting for me while I'm kind of trotting my horse in circles or loping it in a circle. Like, I just couldn't stand the thought of it, you know, because going back to my days when I used to, you know, actually do it for real. So most of the time I didn't have enough time to do that unless I was willing to keep the crew waiting, and I wasn't willing to keep the crew waiting. So I just sort of had to take my chances. A few times, you know, things worked out where I had 4 or 5 minutes to myself before everybody was saddled up and ready to go. And I would definitely do it without my cameras if I had the option.
Yeah, that makes sense. I probably would have been in the same boat. You don't, the more you get around cowboying, like the more you realize you don't want to be the last one out, and you don't want to be in the way. Like, two biggest things I always tell like the younger guys, like, be on time, and then try your best not to be in the way. If you don't know what you're doing, like, at least make sure you're not in the way.
Yeah, which is, you know, that's like a skill in itself, is knowing where to be out of the way. You know, it's that takes a long, that's, you know, and that's the whole sort of your opening line, you know, move your ass. It's like, that's when you're in the way. That's what someone yells at you. That's why it makes me uptight just to even read that.
Well, and the more you look at some of those top hands, like, they're always just in the right spot, always. Just
like a good athlete on the basketball court or the football field, you know, they just are always in the right place. It's that same mindset, you know. You just can read how things are playing out in a way that other people can't, and you just constantly put yourself in the right place. I did not have that gift. I wish I did, you know. I mean, and again, like, I was kind of competent on my best days, but I never was able to do what I saw those top hands do, and they were just always right where they needed to be. You know, it's like amazing to watch. If you can, like, I knew enough to know who those guys were and to know when they were doing it. You know, I didn't know enough to do it myself, but I knew enough to really admire and respect it in those top hands, you know. Same with like really great horsemanship. You know, I was an adequate horseman, but watching those guys that were really, you know, great at it, and it's so nuanced, but man, you could tell those ones that could just get a horse to do exactly what they wanted with the slightest moves. It's a beautiful thing to watch. Or women, by the way, you know, on both counts.
No, 100%. And I think one of the most like closest comparison to that would be like Derek Jeter. You know, it's a hotly contested topic in the baseball world, but there's this one just amazing play where he lays out, catch, and, you know, like makes an amazing catch. And it might have been, you know, it saved a run easily. Yeah. But he was 100% out of his position. Like as a baseball purist, he was not supposed to be over there. Yeah. But he made the catch when nobody else did, and it wasn't even his position. It was just like he knew where to be. He caught the ball, and it was like, and it's this legendary play, but it's still hotly contested. Like, you know, and the purists will say, and the haters, it's usually the Yankee haters, and I'm one of them myself. But I, as a baseball, just a lover of baseball, you're just like, he made the catch and saved the run, ended the inning, and you're like,
yeah,
does it matter if he was in the wrong position? It's just like he was in the right spot when it counted, and that's what the greats do. And
one of those people that just know where to be. Yeah, no, I've always admired it, you know, and everything. But in cowboying in particular, you know, because you constantly have the chance to be in either the right or the wrong place. You know, that presents itself probably 10 times a day. You know, if you're working around a bunch of cows, and you can quickly see who are the ones that, you know, are always in the right spot, and the ones that, you know, only are, you know, 50 or 60% of the time.
Yeah, it's like the good ones are apparent, like real quick, like, and then it's not because they're cocky and trying to you know, point themselves out.
Yeah,
no, they're just
never have to tell you. They know they can just show you.
Yeah, exactly. And then you just all of a sudden you see him doing something awesome, and you're like, oh,
yeah, right.
That guy's pretty handy.
Right.
Yeah. Well, John, I don't want to take up any more of your time, but I really enjoyed this chat. We should do it again sometime.
Yeah, no, likewise, Matt. I really appreciate what you're doing with your podcast and your interest in the cowboy world, and, you know, kind of like, you know, just making people aware. There's just a huge value in doing that. You aren't overly romanticizing it, you know, but at the same time, you know, you're pointing out the really wonderful aspects of, you know, the cowboy way of life, and, you know, why we like it, and why we love it, and but also, you know, that it's like acknowledging the kind of tough reality of it all. So I really appreciate what you're doing, and I certainly appreciate, you know, you having me on the show. It's a real pleasure.
Well, thank you, sir. It was a great chat, and like I said, let's do it again. We'll stay in touch. There's a lot of your brain I'd like to pick some of these days. You've got a wealth of experience, sir. So if you don't mind, I might just send you a couple texts here and there and pick your brain.
Always consider me willing, you know.
All right. I appreciate that. Well, yeah, like I said, I don't want to take up any more of your time, but this was awesome. And go follow him on Facebook. Go buy his book. Go watch Cowboys, a documentary portrait. I mean, it's a really great film, true representation of cowboy life. And yeah, it was a fun conversation, and I can't wait to do it again. So thank you, John. And move your ass. We're burning daylight.
Yeah, making me uptight when you say that, man. Sounds like Billy Binion yelling at me.
Yes, sir.
Your eyes up in the morning, beneath the stars so bright. Pull your hat down, make sure your cinch is tight. snuffy, cold chill up your spine. We'll get your ass moving, son. We're burning daylight. Burning daylight. Burning daylight. In the saddle till the job's done right. Just together, and you won't catch 'em all. But when you ride through the gate, make sure you sit up tall. I can see the horizon, it's looking pretty bright. Well, get your ass moving, son, we're burning daylight. Burning daylight. Burning daylight. In the saddle till the job's done right.